always been good. Give thanks. So we give thanks, for the Lord is good, and he's always been good. Come on and say,
Give thanks.
give thanks.
Give thanks.
For the Lord is good,
For the Lord is good.
and he's always been good.
And he's always been.
Come on, we celebrate you today. Give thanks, yeah.
Give thanks.
Oh, we give thanks. For the Lord is good,
For the Lord is good.
and he's always been good. Come on, try it in 3. Come on, give thanks.
Give thanks.
We give you thanks.
Give thanks.
For the Lord is good,
For the Lord is good.
and he's always been good.
And he's always been.
Come on, I know for myself. Give thanks today.
Give thanks.
We ought to give God thanks.
Give thanks.
We ought to give him
For
thanks.
the Lord is good.
And he's always been good. Come on, let's go out. Come on. Come on, do it right there. We give you praise, God. Yes, Lord. We're so grateful for what you've done and all that you're going to do, God. Yeah. There's nobody like you. Come on, Lord. You reign supreme. You reign on the throne. You reign in majesty. You are our helper. You are our help in the time of trouble. You are our need meter. So we give you glory and honor and praise. Hallelujah. Here we go. We'll forever praise the name of Jesus. Yeah. Of Jesus. I'm going to say it again. We'll forever praise the name of Jesus. Yes, Lord. See, of Jesus. Come on, one voice. Sing, we'll forever.
Will forever
We'll lift your name up high, God.
praise the name of Jesus.
How holy is your name, oh God.
Oh, Jesus.
How righteous is your name, oh God. We'll forever
Will forever
praise the name
the name of Jesus.
of Jesus.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, sing, we'll forever.
Will
Come on.
forever
We lift your name up, God.
praise the name of Jesus.
Your name is awesome, oh God.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, and we'll forever
Will forever
praise your name, God. Yeah.
the name of
He's
Jesus.
a righteous God, yeah. Come on, put it in 3. Yeah, sing, we'll forever praise your name, yeah. For our God is holy. Oh, sing, we'll forever. We'll give you praise, God, yeah. Because you've been so kind to me. Oh, we'll forever. We'll give you praise. Our God is faithful. Oh, we'll forever praise the name of Jesus. We will forever praise the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus. His name is a strong tower. Forever praise. How good it is to give him praise. The name of Jesus. Come on, here we go. We will Say we gotta give you glory. Hey, say we gotta give you honor. Yeah, because God deserves it. Yeah, we will fall. I bless
guys, it's Nikia, and welcome back to our series, Living Single, Kingdom Principles for the Single Believer. We're on episode 4, and I pray that this series has been just as much of a blessing to you as it's been to me. This week, we're really going to get into it. We're going to be discussing some kind of taboo topics, such as the desire for companionship, how to find a good mate, why that desire isn't really discussed in church, and even masturbation. Yeah, we're not holding back this week. So let's hop on over to Bishop and the panel and see what they're talking about.
Why isn't the natural desire or need for heterosexual companionship and friendship not a significant component of the church's teachings and activities? There seems to be a universal avoidance of this topic in African American spiritual community settings, especially in the case of widows or widowers, where loneliness becomes an accepted state of being as a Christian. This was asked by a 56 and over divorced female.
Leah, that's your answer. I can't answer that.
I'm not a pastor, so I can't speak as to why it wouldn't be a component of the church's teaching and activity. But I do think it kind of touches on what we were just previously talking about, right? That I think back in the day, I think as I heard you, Bishop, talking about, how that, if you didn't have the maturity or if you started open up that can of worms is how it was
Right.
Talked about back then. And you're opening Pandora's box, and now you've got a really big issue. And I think that's the same thing, that some things that aren't addressed in churches, from my vantage point, might be because there may not be a comfortability in having these discussions or an expertise. They may not see the value in it. So I think sometimes having membership to say to their leaders, like, here's some programming or some things that would be helpful in supporting my walk with Christ or making me feel supported in this ministry. Not that you're trying to govern the pastor or their leaders. I'm not trying to advocate for that, but I'm just saying that as a member, I think I would talk to my pastor and say, hey, there's some things that impact my life as a widower, and issues of loneliness and things that I don't feel I'm being ministered to in that specific way, to see if there's a way that we can bring some of that into the church today. I think churches are doing a lot better. But I think we still have our areas that are kind of taboo. And so talking about natural desire and need, again, that starts to lead down that direction of sex, which I think is beautiful and healthy and normal and natural. And we need to teach that in the church, that is beautiful and natural and normal and God-given. But we, depending on the pastor, that may be an area that just makes them feel uncomfortable. And so we have to kind of work to bridge the gap. I do think it's critical in today's church because of the hypersexuality of our world, the fact that is in almost every media out there. It's social media, it's TV, it's billboards. I mean, you cannot drive down the highway of any city pretty much these days and not see something of a novelty store on the side or some type of gentleman's club, as they call them. Like, just, it's everywhere. And so I think that the church has a responsibility of also being able to address some of those things that our members encounter in the world. But again, I'm not a pastor. That's just what I think. I think it's just a scary topic.
Yeah.
I kind of have a question about this, or in the realm of the question that's already been asked. Like, what is the church's responsibility, right? And what are the parameters or the agency of that responsibility? Because, like, why can't the church just give the alley-oop? Like, hey, let's say if you have a bulletin board or some type of digital something or other, like, is there a way to sanction here's a date doctor that's a Christian, go check this person out? Because sometimes I'm asking that question because I often feel like we give the local church too much agency or too much responsibility in our lives. And it's like, real talk, I need you to help me understand these spiritual principles. And while they are connected to these other facets, like, I don't want the pastor teaching music theory. He's going to mess up, so like, how can he throw the alley-oop, for someone else who specializes in that and not necessarily have to carry the responsibility within like whatever 90 minutes to 2.5 hours plus one additional weekly thing, or becoming so program driven that like the main thing is no longer the main thing. So I don't know, what is the church's responsibility? I guess we could put it in context when it comes to helping us understand how to date better. Like what is that responsibility or agency?
But I think the church, this is an example right here.
Yes.
This is what the church can do to help in that process. Because I don't think, and I agree with Cedric, I think sometimes the church tries to be everything to everybody and it fails.
Yeah.
It has to know how to farm out some of its responsibility and still get the same kind of positive results. But you can't think that you have the answers for every problem in the church, because you don't. But what you do, you put people in a situation where they can have these kind of discussions. That's why I think church has to build this, I believe you build the kind of community, or you build a church that has community centered. And you have all these diverse communities that can have this kind of conversation where that person is. So the widower is talking to other widowers. They're having conversation with each other. And sometimes they can do more to heal each other and to give each other what they need, at least to deal with the issue. And they may find out, hey, I'm not the only one going through this, but people like me are having the same issues. So I don't look at myself as peculiar or unique. So I think what we're doing now, I think makes good for a church.
Yeah. And I'm glad you asked that question, Cedric, because that gives me an opportunity to clarify. I wasn't trying to convey that I think it's the church's responsibility to be the answer to all things. But I do think that we need to be aware as ministries of what our membership go through. I think some churches, not all, but I do think that there are some churches that only focus on old ways of thinking or old programming or old things that they did, but they're not relevant for what's occurring in their own membership. And so when I was saying responsibility, I definitely don't advocate for the be all end all. I actually prefer, in the same way that you talked about music theory, I'm the same way with counseling. I cringe when I hear pastors saying, oh no, I'm going to do all of their counseling, but they have no training in counseling. Because not just being a place to let people talk, you really have to have a clear understanding of mental illness, right?
Exactly.
And in your congregation. Well, so if you don't know what you're doing with that, you really need to partner with someone. So that's what I meant by responsibility. Not that they are the end all be all, but rather that they have a pulse on what's happening in their ministry.
Right.
How to support them in getting what they need so that their members don't feel lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think that's biblical even. That is the church's position, to Cedric's point, and to Ms. Leah's point, not to be an end all be all, but to be a resource center, to be a resource. The church is a hub and a distributor of resources, tangible and intangible. Okay, the intangible resource that we want people to receive when they come to church is salvation. We want them to receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. We want them to receive community. I think that's even what empowerment zones are for. But your pastor is not also supposed to be your head relationship counselor or financial advisor. Like there are professionals who have this specific goal, who have this specific job title. Now, of course, you should feel comfortable offering these prayer requests to your pastor and getting advice from men and women in the church. But I don't want to call it a burden. It's not a burden, but the responsibility of answering these specific questions is not always on the pastor. Now, I think to Cedric's point, I also have a question about this specific line of questioning. When this person mentions the church, is she talking about the church, capital C, as in the body of Christ, or the local church? Because I do think it is within the church's realm to discuss relationships, to discuss marriage. And I think that they do. But dating is a social construct. Dating is not biblical, but dating is real. Dating is something that we all experience. So I think it's pretty uncommon to hear about that as a sermon topic on a Sunday morning. Now, there's a very famous pastor named Pastor Michael Todd who did 2 series on dating relationships called Relationship Goals and Relationship Goals Reloaded. And he has hundreds of thousands of followers across the world. But in your local church, that's not a common topic. But I think to Ms. Leah's point, the church leaders should assess the needs of their congregation, and then based on those needs, distribute resources to them. That could be a facilitator for an empowerment zone. That could be a referral to a counselor. But it's not necessarily something that I would expect to hear about as a sermon topic per se.
So okay, go ahead.
We can move to,
no, go ahead.
there was this one part of the question that I was curious to know what your feelings were about the universal avoidance of this. Specifically, this female mentioned the African American community, spiritual community, is avoiding this idea and kind of has accepted this state of being. Do you all think that's true or not?
Well, of course.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, of course, that's probably true, right? To some degree. There are many things that we avoid, and I believe that has to do with our trauma. I believe that has to do with, just the way he talks about these social constructs. Well, there are subcultural social constructs, and avoidance for us, I think, is relative to our ability to speak on any matter, 3 generations ago, so yes, I think that's there, but I see it optimistically with platforms like this, because I feel like our generation has an opportunity to sort of open, these doors, maybe destroy some of these, siloed situations. So yeah, I think it's there. And now what? How do we once again find that space, find that safe space, like what Pastor mentioned, where you can understand that you're not alone, so to speak.
Right. Because I think these conversations here benefit. Sermon starts discussion. They don't solve problems. And when you don't have this kind of dialogue, that's where you get deep into what's really going on. And when you start having these kind of discussions, I think it benefits you when you can have these discussions and kind of work through them yourselves. Because when you work through them yourselves, you can kind of answer your own questions sometimes to a degree. Next question, Cedric.
Yes, sir. It says, for me, I don't know how to meet a good man. Where you at, Josh? He looking for you. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know. For me,
they looking for you. They looking for you. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know how to meet a good man. There aren't many options for social gatherings for Christians. Online dating is equivalent to being in a club for the most part. I'm looking for a real relationship and a real commitment. I don't want to be somebody's space filler when they are bored of other things in life. And this young lady is between the age of 36 and 45.
Yeah.
Good question. I mean, I ask myself all the time, like, Lord, where, when, how, who, sometimes. I think a lot of it is you just get discouraged. And just like Bishop said, to keep it all the way 100, you get so discouraged because you're like, Lord, when is this going to happen? I've been praying for my husband. I've been praying for my wife. Where am I going to meet them? When is it going to happen? It just seems like everybody else is getting married. Well, not really married. Most of them are having babies first, and then if they get married or not. But I think it's hard. But I have learned at this point being 32, and I know she's a little bit older than I am, I've just gotten to a point of being content and enjoying where I am right now. I know this is not always going to be my season. It'll eventually change. But I think you have to surround yourself with people that you enjoy spending your time with. And when it's time for it to happen, it truly will happen. I know that is the worst answer because I used to hate hearing it. But I just think the Lord has just got me to that space where you just have to be at rest. And my prayer has changed. You know, I've asked the Lord to let me be found instead of when. Because you do have to enjoy where you are right now. It's not always going to be like this. You know, eventually she'll probably meet somebody like, God, I wish I was single again. You know what I mean? So it's nice to have girlfriends. I know Erica and I are in empowerment zones and other things together where you're able to talk to your girlfriends or whoever and just be honest and have those conversations like, I'm wondering when, but it is, I know Erica and I and Kendra, we always connect. And I think that's the good part is that you're able to have somebody to have that conversation with, to kind of put you back and, all right, Lord, let me just rest and relax and enjoy where I am right now.
Right.
Can I jump in there with a question that might be slightly sensitive? I apologize ahead of time. Okay.
All right, Cedric. All right.
I'm just curious for the ladies within our, let's say, age demographic, because I'm going to put, say, 30 and early 40s in that space, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there any kind of mechanism that helps us think about the matriculation process, right? So like when you first started speaking, Ashley, like you made a statement like, well, the person might be like, well, I'm praying for a husband, or and I feel like sometimes we come into it, not all, but some in general, like, man, Lord, I'm praying for like a sandwich or like peace or like lives. So is there a way, like sometimes I think I'm sorry to sound scattered, but I'm not scattered. I feel like being espoused is like the goal. And I feel like I go out with people and date people and I'm going through this system trying to fulfill their goal versus like trying to find a life partner, which might take some time. So it's like, do you want kids instead of like, what do you do for fun? Like the questions. So I'm wondering, is that just the space and time of like that 30s age where it's like, hey, forget all that, we'll figure that out later, here's where we are? Like, is the prayer always to be espoused, or is it like to meet someone that could potentially grow into that, sort of like Sister Mother Leah was talking about? And I know it's different because we're in our 30s, right? So it's a little bit, we're not children, but is there time to sort of address some of the stepping stones? Because what you said in your first sentence, I feel when I kick it with people, like, and I don't like it, to be quite honest. It's like, relax. You know what I mean? I know that word, it's a thing, but how? I don't know if I'm asking my question proper, but how do we address finding that common ground when it seems like our ideas are so different from the start? Because I feel like that impacts whether or not you find somebody. We're starting like here all the time.
I think it's a combination for some people. Because I think you do really have to know what you want. And yes, I think everyone's like, that biological clock is ticking, but you really don't want to waste your time. Like if someone really genuinely doesn't want to get married or they don't want to have children and you do, it's kind of like, I really don't want to waste my time. Yeah. I do think at some point you're like, yes, I want to get married. But for me, it is a desire for me to get married. But at the same time, I enjoy meeting people just for right now. Like, I'm not going to just walk up to some guy and be like, oh, I know he's going to be my husband. I don't even think about those things. Maybe when I was in my mid-20s, yes. But as I have matured, my thought process is different. And I think you have to find the person who's on a different maturity level where they can understand who you are just as a person and really get to enjoy your company, just you being friends.
Yeah.
What do you think, Erica?
I think when I was first reading this question, I kept being reminded of, can you be desperate enough to wait on God to bring something for you? You have to get to a place in your life where you have seen him perform signs, miracles, and wonders time after time after time. And now you're at a position where, you know what, Lord, I trust you completely, wholeheartedly for you to fulfill each and every step for me. So I often ask myself, can you be hungry enough? Are you desperate enough? Because once you get to that place where you know, like, you know what, Lord, I'm good on waiting for you. I'm good on whatever you bring. I'm good on whatever you decide and your plan and your desire and your will for me. Then everything starts to become peaceful. Then everything starts to fall into place. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, where'd you come from? How did this transpire? You know, those things. So I think that I just keep being reminded, can you be hungry enough to wait on God to fulfill the destiny that he has for your life?
I think, Cedric, that was beautiful, all three of you. I think, Cedric, you asked a really great question. So I want to add to that a little bit. I think I agree 100% with Ashley, and but maybe for a slightly different reason. I agree with the maturity aspect of it, but I also think that women are socialized differently. We are often out of alignment with the maturity development or the mindset of a man. It's just, we're just socialized different. We are okay to be emotional. It's okay for us to explore things. We're taught to be strong and to be independent. And men are really like, go do and get stronger. They're not really socialized relationally, except for
Absolutely agree.
Right? So men get the message of many. Women get the message of few, right? And so when you have these two different ways of communicating and kind of cultivating people, then naturally you're going to date differently, right? You want to talk about sandwiches and having a good time and kicking it. But the other difference biologically is you can get married at 50. Right. Always producing, I don't mean to make this kind of gross, but you're always producing what is necessary for life.
Right.
Yes.
Are born with what is necessary for life, and they lose it as they get older. And so if you have a woman who desires to have a family, a natural family, one that they birth, then that biological clock is always
ticking. Yeah.
And so when you say, you know, can we just take our time, the concept different in those two worlds.
Right.
If we were in our 20s, I think Ashley said it beautifully. We're in our 20s. Yes, let's kick it, right? But once we start reaching over into those 30s, because not all, but generally, that tick of the talk kind of slows way down at 35. So you're talking about, you know, I don't want to come and meet you at this person is 36, 45. I still might have some hope for having my own children. And you're talking about, let's talk about sandwiches. That's going to be frustrating.
Right. Leah.
What
Sandwiches.
Also, part of what you brought to the table. At 41, shoot your shot. What don't you know at 41? Right? Like, at this point, you should be, as a man, and I hate the word shoulds because that can bring this undercurrent of judgment, and I mean no judgment to the brothers, okay? But I do think that there is this concept that at 30s, 40s, 50s for a man, they know if they want to settle down or not. And if they do, then that pursuit in a woman's heart is hopeful that it's going to match their pursuit. I'm okay with getting to know about sandwiches, shooting up layups, you know, how to go hiking, in the cut, hanging with the boys and the fellas. And I also want to tell you about the things I enjoy. But while we're doing that, can we also address this thing?
Yes.
Want to make a family or are we not? And I'm not saying children, because not everybody wants kids, and I don't want to communicate that marriage is for the sake of children. I'm saying this kind of committed lifetime partnership that also brings with it some things, especially in the church, that without it I can't enjoy. The other thing I want to say in response to this question, so I hope that answered yours, is that sometimes, I saw the online dating, and I've heard so many people complain about online dating, and it is what it is. But I think the reality is online dating is much like in-person dating. It's not that much. So if it is like going to the club in real life, it's going to be that on social media, on these apps and things. If you find some, what I would call back in my day, some booger wolves, you're going to find them on club. Like, you can get busters either way. But I do think today, because so many different things, in my time of dating, there wasn't even the opportunity to date outside of my region. Right? Because we'd have to go snail mail, right? I got to wait 2 weeks for me to get this letter, hope that you wrote it out hand. If you weren't in my school or in my area or in my church, then it was really helpful. Today, we don't have that. People have all sorts of methods for communication, visual contact in ways that we didn't have back then, that I think for today's single, certainly the mature single, we have to. I love that part about the empowerment zone, which I've heard a couple of times. I'm going to assume that's a ministry offering there, or a club of some sort that you can belong to an organization. But I think in addition to finding support, I think we also have to break that routine of just coming home, going to work, and being around our girlfriends, or coming home, going to work, and being around our guy friends. We also need to get out and color our lives a little bit. Travel, visit places, go to church conferences, go to professional conferences. I have a number of friends who married older. I married older, right? But we did not find it in the traditional way, right? Some of us found them on the airplane, right? Wow. Coming home from a professional conference. We got that look and was like, oh, where are you coming from? Well, I was at the conference you were having. So we have to avail ourselves to that. If we want to be found, we have to be out in a place where we can be seen. Very hard to be found when you're in these silos. So that's what I would be encouraging people to say. Be creative. Find them.
Good. Very good.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you, everyone, all of you who shared. What are effective ways that folks within that age range, men within that age range who do have vision, who are mature, who do know what they want, can communicate to a person, yes, I want these things, without increasing the tempo, so to speak, of the song, to say, I am interested in this, but I don't know if I want this from you. I don't know you. What are effective ways that we can use so that we're not placed in this box of this person doesn't have vision or clarity, or because that's not always the case, but I feel like it always gets put there.
Exactly.
Yes, I know what I want. I don't know if I want that from you, and in a way that does not dismantle our spending time together for me to find out.
I'm gonna let the ladies handle that before we
Hoping you'd answer.
I know. I was like, let her take it.
You don't have any thoughts of how you would want somebody? I mean, I'll take it, but
to me, I just think it's just very simple conversation, and not too many, but whether you're going to coffee or you're whatever the case is, I do think you have to have that conversation just to kind of generally get a feel for what it is. But I think men have to know, what is it that you really want at that time. I think you have to know what you want, just in general.
I do think there's a value in not speeding up the tempo inappropriately.
Yes.
Come to the first date and they're like, so when are we getting married? And
Legit.
Right.
That's for real. That's for real.
That is so real.
That's
And that's a problem. That's a red
a
flag.
major challenge.
That's too bad, because in that way, I think, I don't know if it was this question or another that talked about that space filler. People can really feel that. Like, I don't really care about you. I just want to plug you in, right?
Gotcha.
Right.
Box. And so I do think that's not good. But what I usually communicate when talking about this topic is the principle of intentional living. That I think we really need to stay connected to our intentions. What are our intentions for our life? What are the intentions for our relationships that we're building, both platonic and romantic? And what are our intentions for our career, right? I think, and obviously our spiritual intentions, that is foundational. But when we're talking about these social things, it's those three things. Because I need to be true to myself. My timetable, if I know that I am desiring to have, let's say, excuse me, 2 or 3 children, and I'm already in my 30s, telling me to not pick up the temple, barring that I'm not coming to the table saying, let's get married, is a hard ask. So I don't want to move it immaturely or prematurely. I don't want to move it prematurely, but I do need to be on my way, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think intentions really help with that. If 2 people can come together and have a conversation about those intentions, what are you looking for out of life? Where are you trying to go? That at least starts the conversation. And I think that's what Ashley was saying. Like, how can we at least start the conversation? Because sometimes it can feel that the moment we start talking about future, guys get scared and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. But if that's what you intend, let's lean into that discomfort and see where it goes.
You know what's amazing to me? Maybe I'm really old school here. There were not too many women that I remember in my younger days. We had friends, and we went out, and we had fun. But then there were certain ones. It was different. So I don't know if that I think dating to me, I'm not sure where that takes you. If you're dating 10 girls, right? I date this one this week, this one the next week, that one the third week, that one the 4th week. I kind of think that's kind of dangerous to the gentleman, not just to the girls, but just to the gentleman.
I think create that failure to launch. I think that's what you're talking about, because now there's so many options. I'm comfortable in getting all these different needs met with different women. That
Absolutely.
It's for me to really build it in a covenant kind of partnership. So I can
See, you got to see. We got to all remember this, and this is the elephant in the room. Marriage no longer is directed toward a particular ethnic group, the same ethnic group. It's all over the map now. And I would hate to be a woman today, a black woman. I mean, I would hate to be a black woman today, because she's got it coming from this way and that way and that way. And brothers don't have to just like you. They got other women that are attracted to them. And the culture has opened up the door for that relationship to be legitimate. So I think men need to have, especially African American men, I think African American men need to be more compassionate.
Yes.
About the situation, and look at the situation for what it really is. See it from her perspective. That doesn't mean you have to change your mind about whether or not you want to get married or not, but see it from her perspective. And Ashley won't be the only one praying for herself. Gentlemen will begin to pray for Ashley because they understand what Ashley's going through. And I think that's where the compassion comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bishop. Wow.
Ashley, you're next.
All right. Is masturbation okay for a single person? I have always felt that it was cool for me to do so as long as I was not with a person. I am in my 30s and a female, and I am not currently sexually active with a person. Is this a sin?
You notice I'm quiet, Leah.
I'm not quiet. I'm ready. Locked and loaded.
Locked and
Leah.
loaded. You got it.
Follow the format.
This is a female question.
Come on, ladies. Well, I think it technically could be anybody. What do you all think about masturbation?
Yes, I do. I do think it's a sin. I do think it's a sin.
Why do you think?
And I recently came to this belief. I always thought, as a middle schooler and even as a high schooler, of masturbation like smoking or drinking. Like, you shouldn't do it, but I can't necessarily tell you in the Bible why not. Like, maybe if you just only drink in moderation or only smoke weed in moderation, I guess I wouldn't do it, but hey, you do you. But I think it's playing with fire. I think it's dangerous. I think masturbation falls under the category of sexual immorality. I think when we masturbate or watch pornography, we are committing an act, and I'm not going to use the word restricted. Thank you for that correction earlier, Miss Leah. But I think, yes. I think we are further leading ourselves into temptation. Mm-hmm. And Jesus modeled for us in prayer that we would ask the Lord to lead us not into temptation. So even if one does not consider masturbation crossing the boundary, I think masturbation is driving us toward the boundary of sexual immorality. And so we ought to flee from that.
Okay. What are some other thoughts, if any?
Challenging. That's a hard space. Go ahead.
It's tough.
No, I was just going to say that's a tough space to be in, especially in your 30s. And I'm not sure if she was previously sexually active and she's just recently stopped. But, that's hard. Once you open that door of, having sex with people, it's a lot more than just having sex, but it's the feeling that you get, and you enjoy it. So that's hard. I do agree when, it's dangerous to go down that path, but you can kind of understand where that person is coming from, because they may be doing it so that they're not having sex with other people, and that's their reasoning to not, sinning, if you will. But that's a very challenging space. And I think that's something you just have to have that open conversation with someone that you really trust, and, put your feelings out there to really say, this is really what I'm struggling with, or this is really what I want to do, and this is why I'm doing it. But someone who's not going to make you feel uncomfortable or shameful for actually telling you, because there's a lot of people who do it. They just don't want to tell you that they're doing it. But it is, I think that's a very challenging space to be in, especially today.
Leah, can I throw this in there before Cedric answers? Yeah. Well, we always have to remember this is just not a single issue.
That's correct.
We have to remember that. This is just not single issue. I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you for that. I caught it.
Right.
Cedric, what were you going to say?
I would say, first of all, thank you, Josh, for sharing, and Ashley for sharing, because I definitely agree with what you all were talking about, like both of you all. I'm going to probably come back to the original question, but in my mind, like, sometimes some of this has to do with, like, purpose, and how aligned one may be within their purpose, right? So I feel like that's one side of it, because while this is happening, what else is not happening? Because I feel like time is at a premium, and it's just kind of like, what aren't you doing? And as a person that kind of spreads my net kind of wide, I feel like there's not enough time to get a lot of. So anyway, I don't want to go too far with that, but purpose is a big part of that. Aligned with purpose is like, well, what's going on with my mind? Now, I don't know about women, but Josh mentioned he inserted pornography. Now, if you look up that word, then it's absolutely going to link with sexual immorality from a biblical standpoint. You know what I'm saying? So if you're a bad enough cat to think about trees and like work that out, I don't know what to say. But if you're using some type of help to get you to that place, and it's probably not the best thing for your mind. And I was just talking to a buddy of mine about this, I kid you not, like a week and a half ago, and I just started doing, it made me think about things biologically. So the first thing I'm thinking about is purpose. The second thing I'm thinking about biologic, and I'm just at the tip of the iceberg of this, so whatever, charge it to my ignorance. Like, I looked up how much of ourselves is packed inside of what we release. Like I said, as safe as possible. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's like the strength to run 20 miles, right? So then, like, we start having this conversation about how much of this carbon copy of myself am I willing to just let go, you know, into the abyss, into the never, you know what I mean? And can that be harnessed into something else? Can that strength, can that tenacity, can that, all these beautiful things that make us go into something else in this world? So again, I'm ignorant on that, but if you start looking at like the minerals and the zinc and all the stuff that's just nowhere, like with no purpose, I was telling my homie, like, I feel like in some ways that would be me like slapping God in the face, because you give me like all this cool stuff and this great stuff to create a whole nother person, like we're the seed carriers, right? So then if I take that and I just like dump it in the trash, like that's really interesting to me in terms from a standpoint of like the thing that God has given me to do and to become, and then also to share, you know, with a wife, let's say. That's really heavy. When I get into the space of like the original question of like, well, is this a sin? It's like I easily want to pass the mic to Pastor Tillman about
sure
that.
You do.
But I think about, there is a passage of scripture that talks about like sin is transgression of the law of God, right? And I started trying to think about things that maybe God has said, or that I can see in the Bible that God has said, and things that I cannot see. And again, for me, it's a fairly easy link to what Josh was talking about. You know what I mean? Because I'm not sure how you would facilitate that without getting into sexual immorality. So I think, I don't know, but I think I put it into that grouping. There is one passage that I looked up a long time ago where it talks about like not letting your seed hit the ground, but it's packed with all this other stuff. Like there's all this other content. Right. You know, that it wasn't just about the seed hitting the ground. It was about like how he was doing. He was trying to be slick, like all this stuff. So I basically say probably yes, because he also says like, yo, if something is in your heart, you know what I mean? You probably already committed it. So I'm trying to think like, well, how can I do that? Something. I need something. Like what's going on inside of me that propels me to that heart? That propels me to that space. So I give a loose, compassionate, gentle, soft, probably yes. But I understand also, don't laugh. No, for real, man. You know, I also understand what actually is saying too is relevant, because I've had people literally tell me, this guy told me, and I'm not going to say the space because I don't want somebody going to the space, but he told me a certain website saved so many, quote, church ninjas. Okay, that's what he said. And so I'm like, what do you mean, bro? And it's basically, there's people he felt like he could have been with who were church people, but instead of doing that, he did this other thing or whatever. He's a musician, a cat, I know, all this. So like what Ashley's saying is like, man, you know, what do you do with that? Because I don't know. So hopefully that all makes sense. I think a very loose, compassionate, gentle, probably. And if you have, I think, gone into that space before, like it may be a very critical a challenge. Because also, and I'll shut up on this, there is something to be said about like just discipline in general, right? I'm not married, so like anybody could tell me. But like I have friends who are married who definitely engage in self-pleasure, which I think is like off the charts. Because I'm like, yo, how could you tell your wife that or whatever? Maybe they don't. But I feel like it's always going to be a space and time where I have to abstain. Even if I have a wife, like if she's dealing with a cycle, if she just had like a child, if she's sick, she got COVID, like I ain't coming over there, you know? Like, I'm just saying, like, there's probably, I don't know, but you know what I mean? If she's, you know, there's probably always the time where you have to engage in that kind of discipline. And I don't personally feel as though doing like that, man, I'm just, Josh, I think you said it so well. It's like that this seems to be a thing that leads to temptation, because like, okay, and I promise I'm gonna shut up, but this is a loaded one. Like to me,
said that 5 minutes
This is a
ago.
loaded
I know, okay.
Pastor, you do that all the time. No, Pastor, you do that all the time. Don't start the show. You always say you're almost done and you're not done. Don't cut the brother off.
No, I mean, okay. So here's my question. I don't have a wife, right? But like, I'm just like, I have a crazy creative imagination. Like that's just a fact. So my thing is like, what if I'm doing this and I have a spouse? Like if I have a taste for this thing that I've been doing, then I have a spouse, but then I like develop this thing in my mind. Like, what if she doesn't fit this thing I've developed in my own head? So does that then create a problem for me? Like later, or I mean, I don't know. So anyway, whatever.
Okay, Leah.
So I want to make sure that Erica didn't have something that she wanted to chime in.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to leave you out of the party if you want to come to the party.
I absolutely agree with everyone. I think when I look at this question, I often wonder, is it the thought that's attached to the action? That's when it develops and becomes the sin. So if you are looking at pornography, if you are lusting after, video vixens or, whatever you see on TV, and then you take it back to your personal space, and now you're having these fantasies, and then that's driving the cart for you to commit that action and then to commit sin. So I always think of this as, what is your thought? What are you thinking, allowing to drive the cart? Exactly, Josh. Where is it in your heart that now, okay, I think that's a very dangerous water that you're getting into when you're entertaining these thoughts. And then Cedric said, when you get married, now you've created this sort of appetite, and this person that you marry, they may be like, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm really not into that, and now it's just created such a dangerous area. So I always think of it as the thought that's attached to it.
So I would agree with that. I've heard a lot of things. I think you all have said some wonderful points about this. I agree with most of you in a lot of different ways. I want to just put another disclaimer. I am not a pastor or theologian, okay? So my approach to
Understood.
is going to be part biblical in terms of my convictions or beliefs, but then also kind of more of a clinical perspective of it biologically. Mm-hmm. So I think from the biblical perspective, if we're only asking about masturbation, is masturbation a sin? There's no biblical support for it being a sin.
That's right. That's right.
The church often utilize that scripture that you referenced, Cedric, about letting your fill on the ground, but that technically was not talking about masturbation at all. It was nothing to do with masturbation or the expulsion of the joy juice. I'll just say it that way, right? There was nothing to do with the masturbation act that led to that seed on the ground. So I think people use that because, much like brushing your teeth or washing your clothes isn't in the Bible, there wasn't anything specific that answered that question. And so I have heard a variety of things. I've heard, how does this feed towards temptation and lust. And the spirit of lust is something the Bible does speak about, so we don't want to become lustful. I've heard people talk about it being kind of selfish, and why are we doing something with ourselves when God designed it to be with someone else? I've heard about pornography. A lot of people associate masturbation with pornography and the like, right? And so here's kind of what I will offer to the conversation. I do think that there is, I think we start with the biological facts. Biologically, our bodies are wired to be sexual. That is not an abnormal,
right.
nasty, shameful, guilty thing. That's how our hormones work. That's what those structures were created for. And so, to me, I think sometimes when I hear or talk about this topic in particular, the struggle for me is, would we feel the same way with other biological processes? Would we say, I think you need to learn how to be disciplined in voiding yourself. Don't use the bathroom. Learn how to not use the bathroom, because it's a biological process. What we have to learn, I think, in the religious community, how do we blend both the biological aspects of life with the spiritual disciplines?
Yes, that's good. That's good.
Covenant, right? And so I think that requires a level of self-awareness. Now, there's also biologically a difference between how men get there and how women get there. Men are more visual. And so I think that I tried to hold myself together when you said, if you're the kind of cat that can think about trees and
get it on.
Men do tend to need a little visual stimulation. It isn't required. Stimulation is stimulation, right? But they do tend to be visually enticed, okay? And so that kind of introduces that concept of thought, that concept of what are we putting before our eyes and things of that nature that may lead us down that path. Women also can be visual, but they don't necessarily have to have that to be enticed in that way, right? It can just be hormonal response, right? That time of the month, getting closer to it. There's all sorts of things that can lead to a woman feeling a little more interested. I'll say it that way, right? So when we think about that biologically, men's bodies are prepared to release every 72 hours. That's biologically. They are ready and really could use or need to release every 72 hours. So we take a single person who's in their 40s and they've always been single and they've been abstaining. What do we do with that? That 72-hour aspect. Women also need to release, right? In the same way, there are all sorts of health benefits that come through sexual exchange. So I think my answer to this question is no, I do not see masturbation in and of itself as a sin. I do believe, however, that without careful consideration, it is possible that it will create things that can become sinful, right? So the use of pornography. I also think anything that you release to, okay, you can become bonded to because of the presence of oxytocin. That is the bonding hormone that occurs when you kiss, when you hug, when you give birth, for women, you give birth, and when you orgasm, if I can be free to say that, right?
Yes.
So God created that on purpose. If men did not orgasm or did not kiss or touch, they would have no way to bond to another because they don't give birth, right? The biggest moment for us to receive it is in birth and in orgasm. So how would men bond? You get some of it in kissing and a hug and embrace. That's why when you're really upset and somebody gives you a real good long hug, you just suddenly feel better. It's really not about the hug, but more about the touch, the embrace, and the oxytocin that it releases. So if you're producing this on your own and you're using visual aids or fantasizing about another person or creating images or looking at a magazine or a lamp, even for that matter, in theory, could create a bond to that thing. And I think we have to be careful of that. That is also what makes it problematic in relationships. It's not that masturbation in marital relationships is a problem or committed relationships is a problem. It's that I think we are learning more socially to turn away from one another for certain needs as opposed to learning how to turn towards one another, right? But for people who have chronic illnesses or that have some type of health condition or problem, masturbation might be a wonderful way for couples to come together and still be able to enjoy the pleasures of sexual intimacy. So that would be my answer to that. I think you have to be careful, but there isn't anything biblically that says it's a sin. I think the spirit of lust is real. I think we can use it. Certain social constructs for sex is not lining up with God anyway. And I think when we engage in those methods, that gets us into some really difficult territory. But I do think you need to be really clear about what it means in your life.
I think this is a very sensitive and touchy discussion.
Yeah.
I think from the perspective that even though we're talking about the biological issues that humans face, there is, though, the thought that is, when Paul says, if you cannot remain abstinent, he then said each man should have his own wife.
Right.
He then said about himself, if you were like me,
you would stay single.
So but he's applying this, he's just applying single, but he's saying, I am capable of doing that. So I think we also have to think about, even though we're biologically there, I think it is evidence to me biblically that one can have the spiritual energy to refute certain things and not it become a continual part of their life.
I agree 100%.
You know,
100%. Definitely this topic makes people uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And difficult, right? It's a gray kind of slippery area. So I do recognize that it can bring up very strong feelings one way or the other, right?
Right.
That. And I think that's why you have to be, I think, Ashley, you said it. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but you had mentioned something about being able to have a conversation about that, be open and honest about those things, right? I think you need to be able to have somebody that you are accountable to or cover trust to kind of grapple with this so that what you do with who you are. I want to be clear as a believer. I do believe God gives the power to go through any stage of our life, right?
Yes.
And presents us faultless. So I need to address that because we have this biological process that we cannot abstain. I think we addressed the question earlier when the person was like, I just think it's impossible to find a woman that believes in abstinence. Abstinence occurs, and it is possible to obtain. But here's some little tips I would give the ones that are endeavoring to not masturbate and to abstain completely from any type of sexuality or sexual endeavors. And that would be to be very careful of the things you feed yourself, right?
Yes.
You cannot expect to have that level of discipline and steadfastness.
Very good.
That way, if you do not have not only a gate for what you let your eyes and your ears entertain, but also a process to get you through those moments where your biology really emerges.
Discipline.
Right?
Discipline.
Ashley, you were talking about earlier how difficult it can be when you're in love and attracted to abstain. And I will say, I'll be a little transparent here. When my husband and I were dating, there came a point in some of our journey that it was like getting a lot harder to abstain. In the beginning, it was easy. We were both committed to it. that was kind of our mindset. We were, we had great accountability all around us. But the closer we got to our wedding, it was like, oh my! I felt like the devil sent out a special attack on. He was like, it was like all of our accountability partners were gone. Goodness, I just said, can we just elope somewhere? It just became a little bit more challenging. But I think one of the things that really helped us is we didn't lie about that. Like, okay, today I can't see you because the way I'm feeling in my body, I don't think I'm going to be able to handle myself or you if we are in the same space. So today, we are going to talk on the phone, and maybe we'll keep that short because my conversation might even go to the left. Right? That's to the right technically. But the conversation might go to the left because I'm in that way. And I think that is what I'm saying. We do have to find that balance. It isn't to say that because biologically there's a justification for it, because spiritually there isn't a message that says don't, means that we should just be reckless abandon. But I do think we need to be real with what we're really dealing with. And I think the challenge is because it's so uncomfortable, sometimes we communicate things that make people, like when I cringe when I hear immorality, only because it makes people feel so full of shame and guilt. So then they get married and they're able to enjoy sexual freedom, but they're still like, am I immoral? It's hard to shift that mindset if you've been looking at sex as temptation and ugliness and immorality and, I'm sitting against God. It doesn't shift really easy. And there's a lot of people that come in to see me just for that. They are married. They are in the church, they are faithful, and they are not using visual aids or pornography, but they cannot enjoy it because it has been taught,
demonized,
spoken,
and demonized.
Right, so I just want to be a little careful. I want to gift you with, let's just try not to add that it's just immoral. It just might be not for you or not what aligns with how you see life or your understanding of your biblical commitment or that discipline that you're making a choice to offer your service to the upbuilding of the kingdom and his purpose, right? It could be something else, but that's what I have to offer.
I think what you just said is so important. The inability for us to talk about these kinds of things keeps us in bondage.
Yes.
And to be free sometimes mentally and spiritually is to be able to have a forum or an environment that allows for me to be transparent without you defining me in some negative spiritual way. And I think that becomes healthy to spiritual growth and spiritual transformation when we can have this kind of discussion, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. A lot of times people suffer in silence.
Yes.
I have a sexual drive. That is my natural drive to be
right.
Not because I've been out in the world wilding. It's not because I had an encounter sexually before, but that's just my natural drive. How do I get ministry for that?
Yes.
I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do if I can't come to you and say, yo, I'm kind of like struggling. So
be honest about that.
Behind closed doors that develop into these unhealthy coping patterns and health issues and secrecies and lies and covering. Like we bring a lot of different things to the table when we aren't able to be authentic and transparent.
Yeah.
I think the body of Christ, I think in the past, a lot of things made you carnal. I mean, a lot of things.
Right.
On right now would have made me a candidate for hell, but I think we've moved gratefully in that way. We've moved forward, and I just think this is another area that we could grow a little bit.
I'm curious if you have any literature on what you were talking about with the things that happen within the body, because I'm very interested in that. Yes, if you could send, I mean, anything, YouTube links, books, articles. I want to know more about that actually.
Okay, I can absolutely send you that information.